I need to stop saying I can't wait for all of these because some of these have been on my TBR for a very long time. And also, I know that a lot of these books are so out of my usual romantasy. Like, we are going to get there. These are just books these are my challenge books. Samantha Shannon tends to write very, very strong female characters that I am obsessed with. Like, date me. Okay, let's talk about two books that I'm quite embarrassed that they're still on my physical TBR. Hello, gorgeous reading goddess angel besties. I hope that you're having the most wonderful day of your entire stinking life. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Tori if you're new, and today we are going through all of the books that are on my physical TBR. Make sure you grab a coffee, tea, water, snack, and let's talk about some books. I don't even know how many books I have on this list. I guess we will count at the very end once we go through everything. Let's start with a couple books that are very intimidating to me that I've had on my TBR for quite a long time. I went through a phase of buying books that I guess are more like classic, that I knew were scary, but I was like, if I have them, it will motivate me to read them that much more. So the first one is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I did attempt to read this book. I got about 100 pages in. Don't think I was in the right mindset. It is one that I will definitely return to because I love dark academia, and I know that this book kind of started that dark academic trend, but you have to be prepared for a slow journey. And at the time I wasn't prepared for that. Let's talk about the Bronte sisters because I have two books that were cover buys. Like I mentioned, they have been on my TBR for quite some time. I have Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This cover was just gorgeous and it's so floppy, and I said, yes ma'am, I want this just to display on my shelves. I usually keep it on the shelf that's up there. She's pretty, she's gorgeous. One day I will get to her. I know that this is a favorite classic for many, many people. For me, I need to do like a SparkNote session and read through everything and what I should be looking for before I jump into this. And actually, I hope to use the same strategy on Wuthering Heights. I did start this book at one point. I think I got about 50 pages in, but the terminology was so difficult for me to understand what was going on. One day, today is definitely not that day. While I'm at it, I'm gonna throw in my last kind of like classic book that I have, and then we will move on. So I have always wanted to read The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I have not gotten to this yet. I haven't watched the show or anything like that. I feel like this is one, when I read it, I am going to appreciate it, even though it's very scary. There's a lot of truth hidden in these pages. I think that that's really intimidating and scary to me, but this also was a cover buy because I just thought it was so simple and beautiful. I knew that I wanted to have it on my shelves. I think that this writing style is much more approachable than like a super classic like Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre, but the subject matter in this is what scares me. Okay, taking a massive swerve, let's go to Litfic. This is a book that I bought last year. I do really want to get to it soon. I just haven't been in a super Litfic mood, but that is When We Lost Our Heads by Heather O'Neill. Our main character, or one of our main characters, is the charismatic Marie Antoine. She is the daughter of the richest man in 19th century Montreal, and she has everything she wants except for a best friend until clever scheming Sadie Arnett moves into the neighborhood. Immediately united by their passion and intensity, Marie and Sadie attract and repel each other in ways that thrill them both. Their games soon become tinged with risk and even violence. Forced to separate by the adults around them, the two spend years engaged in acts of alternating innocence and depravity. When a singular event brings them back together, the dizzying effects will upend the city. It sounds so intriguing. Like, this is a Litfic that immediately when I read that synopsis, I purchased it. I love the comparisons to Marie Antoinette. I love reading about toxic relationships. I think it's so fun. And where this is a toxic friendship, I'm not sure if I've read a book with like such a toxic friendship before. It sounds like they push each other's buttons and it's very dramatic. Next up, I have some books that I thrifted quite a while ago and I will read them eventually. We'll start with Isabel Allende because I read, I think is one of her most recent releases, Violeta. I read 2 years ago now, and I gave it 5 stars. I was blown away by her writing style. Upon my research of this author, I found that Daughter of Fortune is one of her most famous works. Isabel Allende is commonly referred to as one of the most important novelists to emerge from Latin America in the past decade, and her writing is breathtaking. The stories of her characters and her characterizations, incredible. If you love character-driven stories, I think that you will really enjoy her as an author. And also, I know that a lot of these books are so out of my usual romantasy. Like, we are going to get there. These are just books that these are my challenge books. Daughter of Fortune follows Eliza Summers. She is raised in the British colony of Valparaiso, Chile, by the well-intentioned Victorian spinster Miss Rose and her more rigid brother Jeremy, just as she meets and falls in love with the wildly inappropriate Joaquin Andieta, a lowly clerk who works for Jeremy. Gold is discovered in the hills of Northern California. By 1849, Chileans of every stripe have fallen prey to feverish dreams of wealth. Joaquin takes off for San Francisco to seek his fortune, and Eliza, pregnant with his child, decides to follow him. Also, these end pages. And then, speaking of absolutely amazing, incredible, stunning Latin authors, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I have Love in the Time of Cholera. I found this at a thrift store, and this cover is so stunning. I literally gasped. Also the back too, like everything about this edition is gorgeous. All I know about this book is that it is a story of unrequited love that survives 51 years, 9 months, and 4 days. I hear that he also writes with kind of a comedic element to his writing, and so yes. Let's start, because why not, with Carrie Lake. I read Nightshade by Carrie Lake 2 summers ago, and this is such a weird, gothic, dark romance. I think that's how I want to describe it. The synopsis of this book might leave you more confused than anything in the entire world. You can find this book on Kindle Unlimited as well. The reason I have this on my physical TBR, even though I have already read it, is because it's a duology. The second book is called Infernium, and I haven't read this yet. And it's at the point where I'm gonna need to reread Nightshade in order to remember and understand what's going on in Infernium, so that's why these are quite chunky, but that's why these are both on my physical TBR. Nightshade, we follow our main character. Her mother and father have both passed away, and she is kind of out here just trying to survive in this old house that they left to her, I believe. But her father spent his life, he was a very prestigious university professor, but he spent his whole life researching something that he called the messengers. He once told me they walked among us, and that somewhere in this dark and godless city there shined a faint sliver of hope. I had only to look for the signs. I've spent my whole life investigating the inexplicable. All I have found are the unsettling vestiges of inequity, the evidence of another world shrouded by the obscure. Purgatory to some, where depravity hides in shadows, and girls like me are little more than delicious bites of temptation. He believes that there's this veiled universe, like other part of the universe, and it kind of ruins his credibility as a professor, and he dies in a very mysterious way. So we're left with our main character, who is now trying to pick up these pieces regarding this veiled place called Nightshade. This particular place is where I met the cold and callous recluse living in a decaying cliffside cathedral. Jericho Van Croy is the epitome of everything I've been told to fear. A raven-winged harbinger who wears intrigue like a warm black cloak, an enigma that I am determined to unravel, even if it means getting closer than I should. One touch is forbidden. Even so much as a kiss would be my demise, but the sin on his lips burns me up like a wild flame, and his growling infatuation weakens my resolve. The writing in this book was so incredible, even though the premise started off to be a little bit confusing. There's a lot of like world building. You have to be okay with kind of not really knowing what's going on and being along for the ride. That's how I went into it, and like I said, I gave this book 5 stars. Very curious when I reread it if I will feel the same way. This was one of my first introductions into a dark romance slash dark fantasy romance. Sticking with that dark theme for a moment, I am currently reading and loving this, but we have Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. I got this book recently. It was a gift from my friend Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah. In this book, we are in a cursed town of Eden, Kentucky. My character Opal has always had a pretty rough life. She comes from a family that has had to really scrounge for survival. She had to drop out of high school when their mother died very unexpectedly and at a young age to be able to take care of her brother Jasper. Their town is known for two things: bad luck and this very reclusive, mysterious, kind of weird and very dark child book author called E. Starling, the author of The Underland, who disappeared over 100 years ago. All she left were dark rumors and her home. Everyone agrees it's best to ignore the uncanny mansion and its misanthropic heir, Arthur. Almost everyone anyway. Opal has been obsessed with the Underland since she was a child, and when she gets the chance to step inside the Starling house to make some extra cash for her brother's escape fund, she can't resist. But sinister forces are digging deeper into the buried secrets of Starling House, and Arthur's own nightmares have become far too real. This book kind of mixes magical realism with amazing characterization. Alex Harrow has such a descriptive writing style that is just dripping with literary devices, similes, metaphors. It's so descriptive and lush and immersive. I love her writing style so much. She's one of my favorite authors. On my physical TBR, but currently reading, so very shortly it will be off the TBR. Next up is Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reed. I recently read A Study in Drowning, which is her most recent release. Fell in love with her writing style. A Study in Drowning was the first book that I've read by her, and I said, I need to read more. I need to read more from her. I'm absolutely obsessed. So I picked up Juniper and Thorn. A gruesome curse, a city in upheaval, a monster with unquenchable appetites. Marlinchen and her two sisters, they live with their wizard father in a city shifting from magic to industry. They're the last true witches, and that's the way that their family kind of like earns money. Their dad is a wizard as well, but he is very overbearing and he has some very strict rules. But Marlinchen spends her days divining secrets in exchange for rubles and trying to placate her tyrannical, xenophobic father, who keeps his daughters sequestered from the outside world. But at night, Marlinchen and her sisters sneak out to enjoy the city's amenities, revel in its thrills, particularly the recent established ballet theater, where Marlinchen meets a dancer who quickly captures her heart. As Marlinchen's late-night trysts grow more fervent and frequent, so does the threat of her father's rage and magic. Then we have A Far Wilder Magic by Alison Saft. I haven't read anything by Alison Saft, I don't believe, but it sounds like a writing style that I think I will really enjoy. This book in particular, the synopsis really reminded me similar vibes to The Forest Grimm by Catherine Purdy. We have an achingly tender love story. I think that her writing style falls on the more whimsical side. That is totally me just reading vibes. I am not entirely sure about that. But we have our main character, Margaret Welty. When she spots the legendary Hala, the last living mythical creature, she knows the Half Moon Hunt will soon follow. Whoever is able to kill the Hala will earn fame and riches and unlock an ancient magical secret. While Margaret is the best sharpshooter in town, only teams of 2 can register, and she needs an alchemist. Weston Winters isn't an alchemist yet. He's been fired from every apprenticeship he's landed, and his last chance hinges on Master Welty taking him in. When he arrives at Welty Manor, Margaret catches him, and they decide to be an unlikely pair, enter into this Half Moon Hunt, and they together uncover dark magic that could be the key to winning the hunt if they survive that long. Speaking of magical forests, let's actually switch to Silver in the Wood and Drowned Country by Emily Tesh. These are both novellas. I found these on Kindle Unlimited very early in my reading journey. Like, I think I read these for the first time around 2020. I can't believe that was 4 years ago. But these are so whimsical, beautiful. The love story, at least in Silver in the Wood, is so good. It has a lot of fantastical creatures. These give cottagecore energy. Like, if you are looking for books that just radiate cottagecore folklore energy, look no further. There's a wild man who lives deep in the quiet of Green Hollow. He listens to the wood. Tobias, tethered to the forest, does not dwell on his past life, but he lives a perfectly unremarkable existence with his cottage, his cat, and his dryads. When Green Hollow Hall acquires a handsome, intensely curious new owner in Henry Silver, everything changes. Old secrets better left buried are dug up, and Tobias is forced to reckon with his troubled past, both the green magic of the woods and the dark things that rest in its heart. These two, Tobias and Henry, captured my heart so quickly, so thoroughly. I love them so much, and it's literally 100 pages. And I'm obsessed with this. More people need to read this book. The second one is an interesting continuation of the story. We get a different setting in this one. It's kind of more of a journey, whereas this one takes place in the same setting throughout the entire book. This one's a little bit more of an adventure story, but we get a return to our characters. The folklore creatures continue in this one as well. So I have read these before. They're on my physical TBR because I didn't own them physically before. These are gifted to me by Hannah from Hannah Blackwell. Thank you so much, Hannah. I can't wait to reread these and annotate the absolute heck and bob out of these books. We will continue with the more cozy type fantasy, Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher is such an interesting author to me because they have so many different genres that they write from. I was introduced to their fantastical writing style with Thornhedge, and I absolutely fell in love with Miss Toadling, if I'm remembering correctly. Oh my gosh, it was so cute. And when I found out that this book is an adventure, more like cozy fantasy, but it's hysterical with its writing style, and we have a sword that kind of comes to life, if you will. We have a sword that is an actual character in the story. I said, say less. I'm already there. I can't wait to read it. I tend to love her writing style. I think that she brings a lot of lighthearted and like fun into her books. Hala is a housekeeper who has suddenly inherited her great uncle's estate and unfortunately his relatives. Sarkis is an immortal swordsman trapped in a prison of enchanted steel. When Hala draws the sword that imprisons him, Sarkis finds himself attempting to defend his new wielder against everything, from bandits and roving inquisitors to her own in-laws, and the sword itself may prove to be the greatest threat of all. And because the year of 2024 is going to be my journey into T. Kingfisher's backlist, I also have Paladin's Grace. This is her cozy, I guess, I don't know if cozy is exactly the right word, because it is an adventure story and there is plot that's driving these stories, but even though there are stakes, just the writing style that she writes from, you can't take these books too seriously. It's not a very like epic and serious and dark emotional book. There's a lot of lightheartedness that comes with her fantasies. And in Paladin's Grace, Stephen's god died on the longest day of the year. 3 years later, Stephen is a broken paladin, living only for the chance to be useful before he dies. But all that changes when he encounters a fugitive named Grace in an alley and witnesses an assassination attempt gone wrong. Now the pair must navigate the web of treachery beset on all sides by spies and poisoners, while a cryptic killer stalks one step behind. Oh my goodness. We have gone through so many books and I still have so many more. Let's do some quick hitters of series that I'm hoping to continue with. Next up is Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. This is the next book that I need to read in the Throne of Glass series. To be fair, I probably need to reread Queen of Shadows before I jump into Empire of Storms because I definitely lost some interest in Queen of Shadows. I'd struggle through from like the 60% mark onward, and it's made me really nervous and just like unmotivated to continue with the series. Don't hate me. I will get to this eventually, and it's on my TBR and I have it physically, so it's here. This book I'm planning to get to very soon, probably next week. Vows and Ruins by Helen Schurer. This is the second book in the Legends of Thesmar series. I loved Blood and Steel. If y'all are in the Who Did This To You book club, we read Blood and Steel. Oh my gosh. Thea and Wilder captured my entire heart. I have been nonstop thinking about this book because I can't wait to get to it. And the third book in the series comes out very soon, either this month or next month. Just a quick synopsis, not of this book because no spoilers, but of Blood and Steel. We follow Althea Zoltaire. She is living in this kingdom where they only allow men to be warriors. Thea has a different idea. She is trying to prove her worth, to prove that she can be a warrior of Thesmar. She can wield and fight for her country against these shadow wraith creatures that have been wreaking havoc and destruction on their land. Right now there are only 2 or 3 of the true warriors of Thesmar, Wilder being one of them. And let's just say they have a very bristly relationship, and he doesn't think that she can prove her worth to become a true warrior. It's so good. And then last series continuation, even though this is technically a standalone and it is like a prequel book, these books are so difficult to describe. Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. I fell in love with Priory of the Orange Tree, and the writing and the characters are so stinking good. It's an epic fantasy. It has dragons in it. One of the best dragon books I've ever read in my whole entire stinking life with Priory of the Orange Tree. The only thing that has held me back from reading this is just the size of it, honestly. I haven't been in the mindset to fully focus on really, really long books lately, but I can't wait to read this. Samantha Shannon tends to write very, very strong female characters that I am obsessed with. Like, date me. You start off with all of these characters that are so spread out in the world, and then you find over time their stories are getting closer and closer and closer, and they all come together and overlap at a certain very dramatic, very high impact point in the story. And I'm so hoping that that's what happens in this one as well. Taking another shift in genres for a moment, I have An Arrow to the Moon by Emily X.R. Pan. This is a book when I was subscribed to Fairy Loot that came in a Fairy Loot box, and it is very pretty. It has very pretty sprayed edges. It has a very pretty cover. This is a book that was not on my radar, like, at all, but I read The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan last year for the Asian Readathon, and it was so emotional and so good. Again, another very character-driven story, and I believe another very character-driven author. And so I wasn't planning on picking this up, but after I read The Astonishing Color of After, I said, let me keep this. This, I believe, is a Romeo and Juliet retelling filled with romance, magic, and Chinese mythology. Yeah, that's all I know, and that's all I'm gonna know until I read this. Super random, but I do have a Christmas book, Always in December by Emily Stone. I totally meant to read this past December, but from what I understand, this is a sad Christmas romance. Our main character, Josie, mails a letter from her home in London to the parents she lost on Christmas night many years ago. Every time she writes the same 3 words, missing you always. But one year, her annual trip to the mailbox is knocked off course when her bicycle collides with a handsome stranger, a stranger who will change Josie's life. I was going to read this, but everything that I was really leaning into this past December was lighthearted and fun. I read some spicy Christmas romances like Trick Shot, and this just wasn't really the vibe. I've had this on my shelves now for an embarrassing amount of time, like probably 3 years, and I think it's time to unhaul it, but I do really want to read this eventually. So I'm like, should I just unhaul it and then when I'm in the mood for it, rent it from the library and call it a day? Undecided. So she's still here and we're talking about her. It's been a while since I've talked about a Greek mythology retelling, but I know I went through such a phase with mythology retellings after I read the Odyssey, after I read Medusa, like absolutely obsessed. And so I did pick up Daughters of Sparta by Claire Haywood. It just goes along the lines of the feminist retellings of classic Greek mythological tales. That's really all I'm gonna say about this one. It's about Helen, who started the Battle of Troy, and Clytemnestra, who is her sister, and they both have very different lives. Their lives go in different directions, but they both are dealing with gross, disgusting men, and it is just about their stories through it all instead of their husbands' stories that were told more famously throughout history. You know what I mean? I think we're like more than halfway. This Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. I love stories that have some type of base in Asian culture. Like some of my absolute favorite books of all time, and so I knew that I had to read this. It has very high ratings. It has been on my TBR for far too long, and this book was so kindly gifted to me from Cami from Burrows and Books. Thank you so much, Cami. I did actually read, y'all, like probably 30 to 40% of this book. I had the audiobook, I was reading along with it, I was really enjoying it, and then I just put it down and I haven't picked it back up. Yeah, this is a duology, so the second book is obviously already out. It's called The Dragon's Promise. I will continue with this eventually. I tend to read a lot of my Asian-inspired fantasy books during the summer. This book follows Shioriamna, the only princess of Kyoto, and she has a secret. Forbidden magic runs through her veins. On the morning of her betrothal ceremony, Shiori loses control of it, forestalling the wedding she never wanted, but also catching the attention of Raikama, her stepmother, a sorceress in her own right. Raikama banishes the young princess, turning her brothers into cranes and warning Shiori that she must speak of it to no one. For every word that escapes her lips, one of her brothers will die. Penniless, voiceless, and alone, Shiori searches for her brothers and uncovers a dark conspiracy to seize the throne. These two have similar covers, so we're going to talk about these next. We have The Burning Sky by Sherry Thomas. This book was published quite a long time ago. I want to say in the early 2000s, but I love stories with elemental magic. This is a YA fantasy book that has a lot of elemental magic. We follow Iolanthe Seaborn. She is the greatest elemental mage of her generation, or so she's been told. It is her duty and destiny to face and defeat the Bane, the most powerful tyrant and mage the world has ever known. This would be a suicide task for anyone, let alone a reluctant 16-year-old girl with no training. Guided by his mother's visions and committed to avenging his family, Prince Titus has sworn to protect Iolanthe even as he prepares her for the battle with Bane. But he makes a terrifying mistake of falling in love with the girl who should have only been a means to an end. I don't know how well this series has aged. I believe it's a trilogy, and I fell in love with elemental magic reading the Air Awakens series by Elise Kova, and so I just wanted to sample, and that one has been out for quite some time as well. It's also a YA series, so I just figured, why not give it a try with The Burning Sky, and we'll see how it goes. And this book was very kindly gifted to me by Bailey from Bailey Nicole Reads, so thank you so much, bestie. And then next up, with the other book that has a similar cover, I'm so excited to read this, y'all, because SM Gaither took my world by storm with the Shadows and Crowns series, but I can't wait to read this newest book. I believe this is going to be a duology, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Flame and Sparrow by SM Gaither, a Court of the Mar novel. On the eve of her 20th birthday, Karis woke to the sight of a divine creature dying outside her home. 2 weeks later, her sister disappeared, leaving nothing but a trail of blood in her wake. Convinced gods were responsible for the disappearance, Karis has spent the last 5 years plotting her revenge with the help of a cutthroat band of like-minded rebels. So when Drabin, one of her world's most powerful deities, descends upon her kingdom in search of humans worthy of serving him, Karis knows what she must do. Earning a place at the god side will allow her to find what truly happened to her sister and then destroy the gods from the inside out for what they did. I find that SM Gaither loves to write about gods meddling in the affairs of humans. There's a lot of power struggle and power balance, very high stakes. She writes really good battle scenes. So I already said this, but I'm so excited for this book. And this book was so kindly gifted to me from Erin Glass. Thank you so much. Okay, let's talk about two books that I'm quite embarrassed that they're still on my physical TBR. I've talked about them so many times on my channel and I still haven't read them. So we have The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzin. I really lost a lot of motivation to read this book, unfortunately, because so many people have given it very mid reviews or DNF'd it or just not enjoyed their time with it, and it really scares me, so I haven't read it yet. I do still want to, just to see how it goes, but it's definitely impacted my motivation to read it. And then I still have Trust of the Emerald Sea. Y'all, I'm going to read this eventually. I think reading Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson and like not having the best time made me scared to pick this one up, but I haven't given up on Brandon Sanderson. He is such a cult favorite for so many people, and this one I think is going to be a very different vibe from Warbreaker. Actually, let's talk about two other books that have been on my TBR for literally so long, and I still haven't gotten to them. These are two dragon books because I was on such a dragon journey this past year. Shadowless, I got 122 pages in and soft DNF'd it. This is about a group of people that are being prosecuted by almost everybody, by the gods and also the human societies that they're trying to blend into and live in. These people are called the Shadowless. They live for centuries and face a battle for survival, constantly on the run or hiding in the far-flung corners of the Northern Realms. Soon, their lives and fates become intertwined, expedited by a mysterious monk, Amrodin. Driven by a series of visions, Amrodin travels through the Northern Realms, seeking out the Shadowless and trying to enlist their help to take a stand and fight back against the gods. And then we have Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is very well known. It's an epic fantasy. It has crazy dragons in it, although I've heard the first book doesn't have too many dragons in it, or just not a lot of like conflict and action. The first book is a lot of setup for this series. We'll just call it a series because I don't know exactly how many books are in the series. But I'm trying to take my epic fantasy journey a little bit more seriously. If you are familiar with my channel, you know that I am a romantasy girly through and through. I love romantasy, but I can also really appreciate an epic fantasy. I just need to like get my brain in the right place to tackle something like that. But once I'm in it and once I've read a book or two in the series, I am like fully invested, fully in it, can't wait to read the next one. It's just working up the courage to start. Oh my goodness, y'all. The last two books, my TBR cart is now empty and I have all of these books right in front of me. Okay, so last two. We have Warrior of the Wild by Trisha Levenseller. I have fallen so thoroughly in love with Trisha's writing. I read Daughter of the Pirate King and I've read The Shadows Between Us. She writes such fast-paced, fun, adventurous YA books that also have really good romance in them. So this book is also about killing gods. And how do you kill a god? As her father's chosen heir, 18-year-old Rasmira has trained her whole life to become a warrior and lead her village. But when her coming-of-age trial is sabotaged and she fails the test, her father banishes her to the monster-filled wilderness with an impossible quest. To win back her honor, she must kill the oppressive god who claims tribute from the villages each year, or die trying. This is giving a very similar setup to The Bonesmith, which I read recently and loved, and it's Trisha Levenseller. Win-win. And the last book that is on my physical TBR, this is also a very intimidating one to me because it is a mix of fantasy and sci-fi. It's called Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. It has very, very high ratings on Goodreads. It also very much encouraged me to buy it. So I'm not a big sci-fi girly, but I want to try. I know that sci-fi is starting to wiggle its way into a lot of the fantasy girlies TBRs that I watch religiously on booktube, and so I was like, let me try to dip my toe a little bit more into sci-fi before I fully dive into a bigger sci-fi series. Sancia Grotto, she is a thief and a damn good one. I also love stories about thieves, immediately caught my attention. And her latest heist on Tivani's docks is nothing her unique abilities can't handle, but unbeknownst to her, Sancia's been sent to steal an artifact of unimaginable power, an object that could revolutionize the magical technology known as scriving. If the ruthless merchant houses who control this magic, the art of using coded commands to imbue everyday objects with sentience, can unlock the artifact's secrets, they will rewrite the world itself to suit their aims. Now someone in those houses wants Sancia dead and the artifact for themselves. In a city like Tavine, nobody has the power to stop them. So friends, those are all of the books on my physical TBR. I hope that you enjoyed. If you've read any of these books, loved any of these books, please let me know. It really helps to motivate me to pick one up. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the comments and I will see you in my next one. Bye!